People who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it fucking takes to be the best at what they do.
Hey guys, this pre-recorded podcast is with Leslie Thompson of the Rogue Ones podcast. Leslie reached out to me last year in regards to being on her podcast, and as time went on and months went on, my schedule got too busy for us to actually get it done. By the time we got to the point where we were able to get it done, we came up with a concept of releasing them both at the same time. So she's already, or is releasing now, her version of the podcast, which will be trimmed down. Her podcasts are an hour in length. What you're about to see and hear is the full 3 hour podcast, live, well, kind of live, but not really live, but it was live for us at the time. So untrimmed, unedited. Enjoy.
So you do these AMAs on Instagram, and actually last night you couldn't. Instagram was not cooperating with you last night,
yes,
apparently. But I've been watching them over the last few months, and there are just a couple that I wanted you to expound on to start with. So the first one is, you're on death row. You can have anything you want for your last meal. What is it? Do you remember what you answered?
No, I don't. But
grilled cheese.
Yeah, I was going to say grilled cheese, but I was...
Which I'm all for. What kind of grilled cheese? Like, what would you...
I think that comes from, when I was a kid, my mom or my grandma would always, for lunch, they'd make the grilled cheese. So it's more the memory type factor, so it's not like I'm going home every day and eating grilled cheese sandwiches.
It's not like grilled cheese.
I mean, it's got to be cooked right, or it's gross,
Yes.
But that's what it would be if I could have that, and then at least I would be able to think back, to things that I remember.
You answered that from a very thoughtful, this is my last meal, what would I want to remember?
Yeah, because you can eat anything, right? So let's eat something that's going to at least give me some type of,
what a great idea.
Memorable thought that when I go under for good, at least I can take that with me. There's other things I know that will go through my mind when I die, when the time comes, I know for a fact will go through my mind, but there's other things that I know won't, where the grilled cheese sandwich would stimulate some of those other things that I would like to think about before I'm gone.
Well, that's brilliant. I was expecting you to say I just love a good grilled cheese.
No.
And then, the other one, they asked your favorite movie. And you said Coyote Ugly. And I just wanted to ask, why? Why Coyote Ugly? Oh, okay. It was a joke. See, that was, I wondered.
It's when people ask me things like, what's your favorite movie? And I don't have one. There's a lot of movies that I like, for a certain period of time. Then you go back and watch it again. Yeah. It's I could say, Rocky was awesome.
Yeah.
But if I watch it now, it's not those.
Right.
So I'm not like a movie buff.
Right.
But I'm also not saying I don't watch movies. TV shows are more my attention span. So stuff like that, given the choice, and this is going to sound crazy, but given the choice, I'd rather find a Netflix series that has 14 seasons to it.
Yes.
than one movie. Because I know now, I don't even have to think about what I want to watch. It's
You're
just watch this, and it's going to carry me through for 6 months, and then go from there.
We started that with SVU, and then we got to about season 5, and they took off the first 7 seasons.
Oh.
I know, it was a total bummer.
Yeah, that would suck.
Yeah. So what are you in the middle of now?
We've kind of run out. It's I've watched everything on that, because I've had 2 hip replacements. I had some medical issues last year as well, so there's been a lot of time at home. Hip replacements? Yes, both of my hips have been replaced. And so that's downtime, and then, other medical things that I've ran into. So you're sitting there all day long, and I still can work, but at that point, most of the work's being delegated, and it's just managing the work. You're not really doing it. So there's, I'm trying to think if Dexter.
Okay.
I think Dexter, we still have a few seasons, hopefully more than a few seasons left.
How many times have you been through The Office? That would be my thing.
I can't get into that. And the thing is, I ran into the same thing with Breaking Bad. Is I had to watch that first episode about 6 times.
Okay.
Or then I forced myself through the first 3. Then I was hooked. Then it's like, oh, this is great. Dexter was the same way. I've tried to watch that probably for a few years, and I'm like, this is just stupid.
Breaking Bad. I can't get past. I don't know, something about the guy decomposing in the bathtub. I can't get past that.
Yeah, there's certain series that at least you can figure out why you couldn't get past.
Yeah.
As I couldn't figure out why with some of these, because like everybody was saying, oh, it's the coolest thing ever, and I'm like, no, it kind of sucks, man. And I would go back, and so many people tell you, you're like, I'm obviously not seeing something.
Right.
So maybe I should go back and see if I can figure out what it is. Maybe it was him in his underwear in the middle of the desert with a camper. That was that. And Dexter, I still don't know what it was, but now it's at least okay. It's going through there. The one that always shocks people is it was a time when we completely ran out of. Again, you run out of stuff to watch, and it's like shit. Let's look at this Grey's Anatomy, and it's like you look and like, man, I really don't want to watch Grey's Anatomy, but then you're like, 17 seasons. How many episodes a season? Like 40. I'm like, yeah, we're into this.
So you watch Grey's Anatomy?
Oh yeah, I watched that.
All of it?
Yeah, I mean, we have to wait for the new one to come out each week now.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah, when it's done, it's done.
Wow.
And I'm not gonna say I'm a fan of it, but there's good episodes, and there's some real whack type stuff. I like the medical type things.
Did you watch House?
Yeah, House was one we just went through. That was
Yeah.
another one that I never watched when it was on television. I don't watch anything on television, but that was another one like, man, this guy's whacked, and he kind of reminds me of my own doctor. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it worked with that too, and that was a good one.
That's great.
That may be one at some point in time I may go back and actually watch again.
Rewatch.
You just got to have so many years where you forget.
Yep.
I did go back and watch Breaking Bad again for the second time, and was amazed at how much stuff I actually forgot.
Okay. Yeah.
Now when you get towards the final season, it's like, okay, I know, there's
Right.
it's not like you're going to be like, wow, that was the end, because you already know, but it's the little things in the middle that you miss.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad Coyote Ugly, because my question was going to be why, and have you seen any Tom Hanks films? I was just going to,
Well,
so
the funny thing
glad.
with that is somebody asked me right beforehand, John Goodman, I think, is in there, right?
Yeah.
And they said, what's your favorite John Goodman movie?
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't know. I don't pay that much attention. And then questions later, they asked me this. And I'm like, well, what's the dumbest thing I can think of right now that I've watched? Like, Coyote Ugly. And then in my DMs, somebody wrote, you do realize
that John Goodman is in
and
Coyote
I'm like,
Ugly.
oh man, this is funny. This is so funny.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, well, good. Well, let's start with you've kind of built this empire, almost this company that works to educate and facilitate strength athletes. Where did this interest for powerlifting, that was the first thing that where did this come from?
When I was 12, I was put into a powerlifting gym. So that's the short answer. Before that period of time, I was, and this is before, all the different labels that you have now, but I was labeled as learning disabled. So school was always really hard for me. And so I got picked on a lot. So the things that I remember from elementary school is, everybody had their little desk. My desk had a little picture of a clock in the corner of it that would say like 10 o'clock, or it was permanent. That's when I had to leave the room to go see the tutor. And I remember thinking, they can't possibly think that I'm so stupid that I don't know to look at the clock to be able to go see the tutor. And then the tutor that I worked with definitely helped, as far as bringing me up to speed compared to the other kids. It's school is process of finding the average, so in some ways it's getting those that are below average to become average, and then those that are above average to become average. In some schools we'll have programs to be able to take those that are above average and push higher. Some schools will have programs, for the lower to become, better. But typically the schools for the lower to become better end up being like special education, classes and easy route classes, not classes to be able to actually help you do the work that everybody else is doing, but classes just to be able to help you move through the system to be able to graduate. So because of that, I wasn't in the classes with everybody else, most of the time. And then that led to, being beat up, picked on. I don't like to use the word bullying because that can take a lot of different definitions, especially in today's age. A lot of things that people would say today is bullying, I would think is, I kind of know what that is, and that's not really a definition. But long and short of it is, if the person on the receiving end feels that they're being bullied, then they're being bullied, so that's kind of the easy answer for that. And when it started with my uncle, I believe, buying me a weight set for Christmas, and it's just the plastic type of weights.
Did you do that intentionally because he knew you were having trouble?
I don't know.
Just...
I never knew the answer to that, and I never bothered to look back to see. I just knew that, okay, I got this and I got this book. I'm just going to lift these weights.
What book was it?
It's just an introduction to weight training, just to different exercises. So I'd spend 3 hours in the basement just doing every single exercise in the book every single day. And my dad saw that I had an interest in that. He owned his own small business and knew the chief of narcotics that was associated with Finley Barbell Club, and asked him if it'd be okay if I went there and trained with those guys, because it was a private key club, which was a powerlifting club. And so they took me in. They really didn't help me that much at first. I just did my own stuff. And it's still kind of a process that I use today with people if they're working out. And in here in my gym is, I really don't help them that much. I make sure they don't get hurt, but I want to see if they're actually going to show up, if they're worth the investment in my time, because I don't charge anything. And after a few months, they pulled me aside and said, hey, look, there's a meet coming up in Canton, Ohio. You're going to do it. What the hell is the power? What is this? Well, you squat, bench, and deadlift. Okay, that's cool. I know how to do those. And so I turned 13, and then a couple months after that, I did my first powerlifting meet. And it was a different system than what they use today. Today they use a round system. This was before. It was more. What do you mean
round system?
Everybody does their first attempt, then everybody does their second attempt, then everybody does their third. Where before it was like a round robin. You started with the weight being the lightest, and then it went up to the heaviest. So because I was the weakest, I did my lift, and then I had 2 minutes, and then I had to do my second lift.
Oh, no.
And then 2 minutes, and I'd have to do my third lift. Then they would raise the bar 200 pounds, and then one of Louis Simmons's females came out and did her first lift. And I thought at the time, this is the sport for me. Because if I'm getting killed, absolutely killed, and I didn't know she was a world champion at the time, by a female, then there's a lot of room to grow. There's a lot of room for me to be stronger.
Where did that attitude come from, though? Because I feel like a lot of people would have felt defeated and would have been, I personally probably would have felt like, well, this isn't for me if I can't, There
was a point in time when, before all this happened and before I got into junior high, for me started in the 7th grade. So it was 7, 8, and 9. So it was a little different than how some schools work now, where high school's 9, And there was a point in time before it was in the 6th grade where I was walking home from school, and it was normal for somebody to, throw me on the ground, kick me, just spit on me or whatever it was going to be. It's kind of a normal process. I was walking home, and it was going through, like crossing through a street, right? You got 2 yards, so you're walking through, 2 people's backyards, which nobody at the time cared. It was just kind of a shortcut. Instead of using we didn't even have sidewalks, but instead of using the street to go all the way around. And during that time, one of the kids had a tetherball, and instead of it being on the tetherball pole, you know what tetherball is?
Yeah,
the
pole,
and it spins around. Okay. Well, he took that and he kind of lassoed my legs, and got me down on the ground, and then just beat the shit out of me, and then turned me around, shoved my face into the ground, and it went into a pile of shit. And I remember sitting there, and all these other kids were laughing and kind of cheering it on. And I couldn't do anything about it because I didn't have the self-esteem to do anything about it. And I'm being kicked, and being kicked by a few of the different kids. And just sat there thinking, how long am I going to take this? And what am I going to be able to do about this? Because here I am laying in a face full of shit. And all I remember is getting up on all fours in a quadruped and getting kicked, in the side, and it didn't hurt. And I realized something's going on here. And I realized I was fucking mad is what was going on. I was pissed. And then, stood up. And then the moment I stood up, they all laughed and kind of went away. But my mind, it was like, okay, this is it. I stood up. This is the last time anything ever like this is going to happen again. And then short after that is when the weight set came into the equation. So I still had that stuff. But when I started training, I started getting bigger and I started getting stronger real fast. So what happened is, I go into the 7th grade, which is kind of a new start because you have some of the same kids that are coming with you, but then kids from other neighborhoods and stuff like that are coming along, and I'm wrestling because one of the friends down the street that was kind of a mentor for me was a wrestler. So I'm like, well, how much worse can getting beat on a wrestling mat be, than all the other crap? Yeah. And when I started wrestling, I realized here's a tool that I can use that if I'm ever in that position again, I can actually get out of it, and kick somebody's ass. Yeah. So during that wrestling season, just with the weight training and the weight training that was going on with wrestling, started to build that confidence to a certain degree, just a little bit.
Well, and you tell the story of there was a time when you twisted your ankle or something and you came back inside and your dad, you said you twisted your ankle or something and your dad was like, well, go on out or something. Yeah, he sent you back out. Was that, so that sort of attitude of overcoming and being a fighter, in a sense.
Yeah, and I always had that. I always had that kind of thing with, my dad. And, I swear to God, I had a concussion the first time I started my first football game because, I'm seeing stars and, I'm fucked up, and they're driving. My parents are driving me home and I'm in the back seat of the car and I'm still seeing stars, and they stop, and they go into a party for like an hour, and I'm in the back seat of the car thinking, well, obviously, And I remember him saying, look, this is just part of the game. You need to learn how to hit people harder. You hit them harder, stuff like this isn't going to happen. And so when the powerlifting kind of came through with that, it was kind of like in wrestling, I got beat pretty much. I got beat the whole first year. I never won a match. So when the powerlifting came, it's like, okay, this is just like the wrestling. I'm starting at the bottom. There's no place lower to really go. I can only go up. And at the end of that season, I was running the stairs and waiting for my mom to pick me up, and everybody's laughed and my mom was late, and I just kept running it, and one of the coaches came by and said, what are you doing? Because it's the end of the season. Like, why are you running the stairs? The season's over. This is like the last practice. And I told him I don't ever want to get beat again. And he says, you keep working like this, you'll never get beat again. So that was like the flame that started a fire, and that Coach Bill Mullen, he changed my life with one statement. And that one statement, is what set that whole thing up to where when I went back in and then took that into powerlifting to where, I can get better, I have people around me that can teach me how to get better. And I was very fortunate and blessed to have people who knew what they were doing. So I didn't have people show me bad technique and all this. The right type of stuff. So I got strong fast, I got big fast, real fast. So I very quickly became the person everybody was making fun of to the person nobody wanted to fuck with, you know, and there was payback for the dude with the tetherball.
Okay.
You know, so that did come at a party.
What was the payback?
Once I started powerlifting and competing, I wanted nothing to do with, I never smoked weed or anything like that because I had allergies, and my nurse at the time told me if I smoked weed I would die, which is probably a lie. But I mean, it scared the shit out of me because I was getting allergy shots each week.
Yeah,
and she's like, well, you're allergic to it. So I never did that, but there was still always beer and crap like that around. And when I started powerlifting, it's like, I don't want any of this. I don't want any, anything that's going to work in a negative way towards me getting stronger, I don't want to be a part of. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't go to parties. I wouldn't do things like that. So I became very, and I already was very internalized and very, I don't want to say a misfit, but I didn't have a lot of friends. Isolated,
yeah.
You know, and isolated on purpose. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody would try to befriend me, and I didn't want any part of it.
Oh, really?
It's like, just leave me the fuck alone. And I'd spend more time sitting under a tree, you know, by the golf course, just looking in the sky than I would spend doing most anything else.
Well, you talk about, there are so many moments of like these isolated moments that you talk about in your books, Under Bar and Raising the Bar. And the questions you would ask, I mean, you went from questions like, what are clouds? And why are we walking on 2 feet when dogs are walking on 4? All the way to like, what is life? And is God real? And I mean, like these questions that you ask yourself in isolation. And then what was funny to me is the story that you tell of going to that key gym with all the powerlifters. And it seemed to me like that was like the first time when your isolation, even if everyone felt isolated or alone, you were alone together, you know? And so instead of being the one kid with the clock on your desk, instead of being the one kid that was beat up, whatever, now you were the person doing something about it with a bunch of other people. And now you had your thing. You kind of felt like you fit into a place.
They cared too, because part of the story that I left out there is, you know, the chief for narcotics, I was getting in trouble.
Okay.
All right. So I was in juvenile court many times, you know, so before I turned 16, I already had like 7 points on my license, because that's how they penalized you. It was, you know, instead of going to juvenile jail or whatever they're going to do, it's like, okay, there's 2 points on your license. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I don't even know what this means. Yeah. You know, 8 points means your license is suspended. So the funny story with that is I get a speeding ticket after my first week of having a license, and I just lost my license till I was 18.
Oh, no.
So I drove for exactly 1 week between the ages of 16 and 18. But
what was it that you were doing that you were getting in trouble for?
Just stupid shit. Like, I wondered what would happen if I would pour gasoline down the school slide, which was a big slide, and lit it on fire. And then I did it, and I lit it on fire, and I'm like, oh my God. It was the coolest thing ever, by the way, because it goes up real high, then it doesn't like all like blow up at once. It like slides down the slide, like, you know, like a flaming god going down the slide. And I'm like, this is cool. And then every light around the school, every house light came on, and then I start hearing, you know, sirens. And so, you know, that kind of ended up with trouble. And, you know, that, or, you know, breaking into the school just to see if I could do it. And then just stealing like markers, you know, I mean, not even stealing anything worth, just to do it, you know, just dumb shit like that. Some kid would piss me off, so I'd I'd break their windows out, and just things like that. And nothing that bad, you know. I guess you could say the one was, you know, when I did start to get stronger, and I found that one kid in a party, you know, that ended up with an assault, you know, and so that was, I should have got a pass on that in my mind, but you know, it was still wrong.
But now you're in a gym with you said the head of narcotics.
So now when I go in, they're on my ass. You know, they're always on my ass, and they're like, look, you know, we're training every day, 5 days a week. That's how we train in here. You need to come from school straight here. You know, and I couldn't drive. You know, I lost my license, so I had to walk. You know, so that's where it was, and then that was until, you know, it was time to go home, and then I was at home. And then I had a girlfriend, same girlfriend from 7th grade to 12th grade. So she kind of helped, steer that, keep me out of trouble.
You had the
from
same
that
girlfriend
standpoint.
from 7th grade to 12th grade?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And a lot of that too was, I did care for her. I'm not going to say I didn't care for her, but it made it convenient for me to train. Like I didn't have to worry about finding a girlfriend. I didn't have to worry about going out. I didn't have to worry about going to parties. I didn't have to worry about all this. I just had to worry about training. And powerlifting became my number one priority because it took me from the kid that was getting the shit kicked out of him, that was getting in trouble all the time, to the kid nobody wanted to fuck with,
Right.
that was actually now destroying people in wrestling and killing people in football. So it took me from, one identity to a completely different identity, but I never forgot that first identity. So when all these assholes that used to make fun of me wanted to befriend me because now I'm the person on the wrestling team that never loses, I didn't want to associate with them.
Yeah.
So I only associated with what my parents would call the kids from the wrong side of the tracks, which to me they weren't, because they weren't getting in trouble. Just because they were poor, I was middle class. Just because they're poor doesn't mean that they're from the wrong side of the tracks. They were my friends. I knew they had my back. If something was to happen, they were there. All these other fake fucks, they were the ones making fun of me, but now all of a sudden they want to be my friend. So in wrestling, that didn't happen as much because wrestling's kind of like powerlifting. It's a sport where people go in who have independent personalities, and and it's your result is dependent upon your own work. You work harder, you work your skills harder, you're going to have the payoff from that. Football was something that I never really enjoyed. I did it because my dad wanted me to do it, and he put me in it from a really young age. And there became a crossing point because of body weight where I had to make a choice, between the two. And, the wrestling coach, he changed my life later, but the football coach, gave me this big list of all these important reasons why you wanted to play football, and it all was associated with teamwork. And I'm looking at the list and I wanted to vomit. Like everything on that list, like seriously, you're going to have a group of people around you that support you. That's bullshit. I've never had that in my life.
Yeah.
That's a lie. So I'm looking at it. I look at the frame of reference I'm looking at it from. It's like, this is not a positive. This is a negative list.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with this. And why are you bothering me during my lunch? And, I mean, there are so many things, because I was very good at wrestling. I was kind of okay at football, but the heavier I got,
And you said it was a weight thing. So was it something where you had to either choose to lose weight or stay at a weight or gain weight, or what do you mean by that?
If I stayed in wrestling, I was going to have to be a super heavyweight.
Okay.
And I was lean, so I would have been a very light super heavyweight. And the super heavyweights were, to put it as bluntly and trying to be as polite as possible, they were fat, sweaty slobs that smelled like shit. I had to practice with them sometimes, and that was bad enough. And it was gross. And it was just gross. I didn't like it. And so I would have to keep my weight down. Where in football, they wanted my weight up because they had me playing on the line, because my speed was not fast. My lateral speed was not fast. My forward speed was fast. And my strength was through the roof. So I could do better, being in a line position. And after conversation after conversation after conversation, and the wrestling coach just saying, look, Dave, do whatever's best for you. And I'm like, I know what's best for me, man, but I don't know if I can keep dealing with all the bullshit, because I don't want to be a heavyweight, and he understood my reasons for that. And so I played football. But don't get me wrong, once I made that decision, it was all in. It's like, I'm going to play football. I am going to fucking destroy everybody. And then what I realized when I did, and I played, like I said, the junior high, the 9th grade was in junior high, and then high school started at 10. So they took me from the junior high and then drove me to the high school to play with the varsity, because my skill level and my strength was higher than the junior varsity level. So when I got there were 2 of us that did that out of 3 schools in town. When I got there, I knew and it was like, here's every one of these motherfuckers, every one of them that when I was younger. Here's this asshole that fucking slapped me with a ruler upside the head. You know, here are all these guys, and they're all in the locker room. They're like high-fiving and all this shit. And I'm kind of playing around like, okay, cool, whatever, but just kept to myself. It's like, let's just wait. Let's get on the field. You know, let's get on the field. And then we got on the field. You know, my strength helped me tremendously, but I also wanted to destroy every one of them. So there are certain things in football, one called a door drill, where there's a door, then say 5 foot back, there's one guy, 5 foot back, there's the other guy. Coach says go, and then the guy with the ball either takes one way or the other. Okay. And this guy, you know, he has to react to be able to hit him. And I used to love that because I could pound the shit out of whoever was through there. You know, either way, because nobody was going to come through harder than what I was, because I was coming through with more than physicality. I was coming through with the mental aspect of I am going to destroy, because I don't know who's on the other side, but I'll guarantee it's one of those fuckers that I'm going to pay back for what they did. And so that brought my level up there, and then it didn't get me to a point where I was a starter. I had to get through the 2 days or whatever it was there. My work ethic was high. So, you know, the running afterwards and all the other stuff, I would run. I never backed off anything, because nobody was going to outwork me. Some of that comes from my dad, you know, some of that comes from the wrestling, some of that comes from the guy telling me if you work hard, you'll, you know, so it all comes from multiple different factors from that.
But you're doing so well, you know, in all of these athletic things, football, wrestling, powerlifting. Academically, though, still struggling quite a bit.
Terribly.
Through all of this. What was it? Because you did go on to actually you have a college degree.
Yes.
What changed in you that made that possible?
Through high school, it was easy. All right, because I was still tracked LD. So they tracked you, you know, college prep, trade, because we did have trade associated. So there was like wood shop, metal shop, stuff like that. And just get the kid out of college. So I was tracked, just get the kid out of college. So everybody else may be taking biology. I was taking rock science. So here's 12 rocks, learn their names. And that was that. So everybody else was taking math. I was taking business math. You know, everybody else is taking.
Which seems more practical, actually.
Yeah, well, in a way, yeah. But I didn't. English, you know, I didn't take really any English courses. It was like writing. So you just sit and write something. Then actually one of the courses was reading. So I would just read Powerlifting USA. So
but literally they just wanted you to read. That was the course.
Yes,
just sit there and read.
So it was just kind of sliding through. And so that made it easy, because, and I was not an A student. I was still, I mean, to me, a D student, I could still play.
Yeah.
All right. So even if it was an F, you know, the coach would come by before grades. You'd hear a knock on the door. I look over, the coach talking to the teacher. Then the next thing you know, I got a D, you know, or a C minus. You know, so a lot of it was just kind of given to me.
Yeah.
The two things kind of happened with the college thing is the head coach changed between my junior and senior year, which may have, they also changed the position I played, but I still ended up being all-state or second team all-state in a different position. But the coach that came in didn't put up with that shit. So he knew where I was tracked, but he made me take Algebra 2, which he taught, which I didn't even know what the hell algebra was. And part of the deal was, you know, I had to take his class, and then I had to report to the football office 3 times a week to be able to take that. And then I got an A in that course. So there was a little bit there triggered that, you know, I can do this if I have help with that, but still you're a teenager and everybody else is doing work for you. And there's also my junior year, the guidance counselor, I remember having a conversation, and I said something about college, because my parents kind of expected college. I was kind of thinking I was going to go to college. And they said, there's no way you're going to go to college. You don't have any college preparatory courses whatsoever. And your grade point isn't going to be high enough you'll be lucky if you're going to graduate.
Did you expect, or did you just think that you might play football somewhere, that you'd get picked up?
I didn't think that. I thought there could be a small possibility, but I knew I was too short for the positions they were playing.
Oh, okay.
So that much I knew. So I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my life except powerlift, because that was still the first priority. And my senior year, I arranged it so, because the coaches loved me because I was strong, I basically taught weight training or had study hall, or the first 5 periods of every day I was in the weight room. And I wasn't even training. I was just showing other people how to lift weights, because that gave the coaches time to go in McDonald's and eat, because I was signing people in. I mean, weight training was just a junk course anyhow. It's just what the kids would take for their gym credit. And it gave me a way to not have to sit in study hall and be bored. And they knew if I did have a study hall, I was going to skip it, and then I was going to get written up for that, and in-school suspension and all the other stuff. So I spent that time showing people how to lift weights there, and I'm like, well, this is kind of cool, showing people how to lift weights. And then I still trained, with the Finley Barbell crew after football practice. So somebody would always take me from practice to there, and then I'd either walk home from there, or my mom would pick me up, or my dad would pick me up from there, and one of the guys would take me home. So that experience with that coach forcing me to do that kind of laid a little tiny foundation, but not much of one. But it was enough that I knew if I get into a school, I can probably find a way to make it work if I pick the right level courses to be able to do it. And only one school would accept me at the time, which was Tiffin University, which was a business college. My grade point was like 1.59, which it wasn't even enough to graduate. What they ended up doing was taking some of those times in the weight room for the whole year and then found a way to give me credit. Okay. For that wasn't for gym work, but for, some like coaching or work study or something like that, to be able to get it up to like enough to be able to graduate. Okay. So that made it hard. I couldn't get into anywhere. I couldn't get any public school. It was just denial. But Tiffin took me because it was a newer school. It was a business only school. And
what do you mean by that? You mean like if you went there, your purpose was to start a business, be in business management? What is the business?
I still really didn't care. I just knew I had to be in college. I did not, through high school, I did work as a fitness instructor in a club, but I also worked my summers in factories. It's kind of a little bit of a factory town, and I knew I didn't want to do that. It sucked, but that's kind of what everybody did. If you could get in Cooper Tire, that was like the gold standard. It's like started all these other ones, get in Cooper Tire, then you're kind of set. And that's kind of how I was tracked. And the friends that I hung out with, that's what their goal was. But I didn't want to do that because I hated it. It's like, this sucks. I worked at Sundor Brands, which made Sunny Delight orange juice. So I'm watching these stupid ass bottles go through, and if one of them, I had to flip the ones off that weren't full, and it was just day after day after day. And I wanted to break the record, so it's like stacking the pallets. It's like if you stack so many pallets, I wanted to stack them faster than anybody else. Then it pisses everybody off in the plant. Because they're like, now they want to go at their own pace. And I'm like busting my ass trying to get a workout over here.
Just trying to stay
so
interested.
They're pulling me aside and they're like, dude, just chill the fuck out, because they want to pace it, And so I didn't want to be a part of that. So Tiffin was just the only place I could really go. And I went there, but the caveat there is I had to take courses that I did not take in high school. I had to take English. You know, I had to take algebra. I had to take biology. I had to take, and then once I got through those, there was a communication course, an accounting course, a finance course, marketing course. And so just basic level 1 business coursework. So, and it was a smaller school. I went through there, I ended up getting A's and B's, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. Actually, I really can do this. You know, they were good teachers. They were very good at what they, you know, especially the ones dealing with the algebra and the English and all that kind of stuff, because we were all kind of the same boat. You know, these are the kids that either slid by because of sports or slid by for whatever reason, and now we got to try to fix them or they're never going to make it through.
Wow.
So they cared and helped and made a big difference. And then I'm like, I could get the fuck out of here, you know, because I don't know what I want to do, but the gym here sucks. You know, it was a YMCA, and I did bodybuilding at the time because there were no powerlifters. I couldn't powerlift, and it was just like this.
Was that a big switch for you? It seems like a big switch in terms of like, because that's very dietary, right? Like that's a very sort of like.
Yeah, it was, but I didn't have a choice. You know, I love lifting weights, and it's like, well, fuck, if I don't have anybody to spot, and what am I going to do?
Okay.
Or if they don't have the equipment, I can't do it. And it's not like you need a whole lot of equipment. So it's just what I did. But then it's like, okay, I'm going to go to Bowling Green State University. And I went there, and it's like, okay, now they have a powerlifting gym, but this is like some kind of recreational bullshit. So I found a gym in Toledo that had, you know, powerlifters there and was training there, and flunked out my first semester, you know, and I was not used to 300 students and one teacher that you can barely understand. You know, so I'm still trying to deal with. It's
like lecture style classes.
Yeah, I mean, the dyslexia, the learning disabilities, all that kind of stuff, that's still real. It's just I didn't know how to really work with it.
Yeah.
You know, I knew how to work with it if I had a teacher that knew how to take it at the right pace.
Yeah.
And
so was it dyslexia then? Have you since been able to figure out what it is
it's
that the
dyslexia,
learning?
and it's just, it takes me longer to focus if I'm reading something than what it takes other people. I may have to read the same page 10 times.
Yeah.
Even if I'm interested in what it is, and it just takes longer, and it's not, I've just accepted that, you know, certain things spelling wise are always going to be off. You know, there's certain words I'm never going to be able to really pronounce no matter how hard I practice doing them. So I kind of know what the limitations are, but they don't matter, because once you know your limitations, you know what your strengths are.
Yeah.
You know, because it's the opposite of what those are. And so after I flunked out, I came back, and I think my grade point at that point in time was like a 0.75. You had to sit out a semester, so I had to come back home, which I did not want to do, because when I left home, you know, to go to college the first time, and I transferred over the summer, my goal was to never go back home again. So I had to go back home and spend three months there with the hope of getting back into summer school. And I went to the high school, to the weight room, to be able to just catch up with the coaches that, you know, I knew that helped me. And the barbell club I used to be at was kind of no longer existed, and I was like, well, maybe I can train out there. And the wrestling coach that I had that never really pushed for me to continue wrestling, I ran into him in the parking lot, and we were having a conversation. And well, one thing I found when I was at BGSU was something called a library, which, you know, I never really went into before. And while I was there, I found, you know, the Soviet Sport Strength Review. I found the International Journal of Sport Nutrition. I found all the NSCA journals. I found textbooks on strength and conditioning. I found textbooks on, you know, motor control. I found textbooks on, you know, anything related to strength. And I would sit there all fucking day and photocopy studies and photocopy, you know, articles. And because this went far beyond just like muscle and fitness and bodybuilding books. With that, I thought I knew everything about training. I just realized here, I don't know a damn thing. So I'm just absorbing all this shit. And there was Angel Spazoff came to the United States many, many years ago for a tour, and it was documented in one of the NSCA journals, and it's read over like 4 or 5 journals, and it was how the Bulgarians trained. And it was intriguing. So I'm looking into that. Then I'm looking at why these methods? Why are they doing this?
You're actively studying. You knew how to study. You were
so I'm trying
doing
to figure that, like, how is this going to work with powerlifting? And then when I went back and I'm in the parking lot with this coach, I remember him saying, how's school going? I'm like, it's fine, And I said, but listen to this. And I started going into this Bulgarian shit. And I'm like, I think if we do this, and instead of actually using a max, we come up with some type of perceived max, so we don't have to max out all the time. And then we work up and figure out what that max could be, but then base the percentage off of that, and then work. And so this is going on for like 20 minutes. And he just stops me and he says, Dave, listen to me. How are you doing in school? Because he already knew. I didn't know he already knew. And I said, I flunked out. I said, I think I'm home. I'll get a job, either back at Sundor or one of the other places. But, if we can find some place that's got these power racks, and I'm kind of back on all this kind of stuff. And he stops me again. He said, Dave, listen to me. You are not stupid. And he had to say it a few times before he got my attention, because I kept, they say that I'm going to look away, right? Right. And he caught my eye and he said, you are not stupid. You're just fucking lazy. And it stunned me. It's like, fuck, and that was kind of like the end of the conversation. It's like, I don't remember anything after that. He could have turned around and walked away, or we could have talked for another hour. I don't remember a thing. I just remember driving home and having to pull over and crying in the median because I didn't fucking know now. Was I stupid or was I just being lazy? And his point was, look at what you just told me. Yeah. And I'm like, fuck, I got to go back. So I drove home and I told my mom, look, I still can get my job as a bouncer. I can still get my job managing the gym I was at. I said, I've only been out for a week. One fall, I can get those back. I'm going back. And she said, but you can't take any classes. I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to work there, pull more hours, be able to save, because I'm paying for a school as well. Okay. So be able to save the money to pay for. So her concern was, where are you going to make the money to pay for, the next summer class? And I'm like, between these 2 jobs and maybe a third, I'll find a way. And then when I went back with that question in mind. Am I stupid or am I lazy? And then it's like, okay, now I know my limitations. I'm not going to take more than 2 or 3 courses at a time. No more of this, because you get bonus. Like if you take 4 classes, the 5th one's like free.
Oh,
it's kind of,
okay, sure.
By credit hours or however it was. I'm not doing that anymore. So I would sign up for 6 courses and I would drop the 3 that I thought were hard. Okay. I picked the courses by walking the shelves of the university bookstore. So no more syllabus, no more counselor, none of this. I just walked the shelves and found books that I thought were cool, and then I took those classes.
So you weren't in like a program necessarily.
Not
you
at
were
this
just
point.
Taking. Okay.
Yeah, when I went in, it was business. Like my parents wanted business. Everybody was pushing me for business. So that's kind of where the direction was. And I didn't know what it was. I just knew I wanted to fucking powerlift. So I'm walking the shelves and it's like, oh, okay, deviant sexual behavior. That sounds interesting to me, and so I would take that and,
that was a whole class?
Yeah, there was a whole class on that. And then there's like psychology and then some other things. I'm looking at things like, well, the psychology would be cool because then I can learn how to use my mind better when I'm training. And the communication is cool because if I am working as a trainer or a coach, at some point in time, I have to learn how to be able to communicate with that. So I'm picking all these courses based upon what I really thought I wanted to do in the future was still power lift, but at some point in time, I want to be able to show people how to lift weights, but there was no avenue to be able to do that. There was no profession to be able to do that.
Was that all these certifications, all these trainings, did that exist at this time?
No, not really. I mean, the NSCA a little bit, but there was the strength and conditioning field was just kind of starting. It wasn't in an infancy. I mean, it was maybe 15% in, because I do remember in high school I was being recruited by Pitt. And all I wanted to do was to speak to the strength coach.
What's Pitt?
University of Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I wanted to speak to the strength coach. I didn't want to speak to the coach. I didn't want to speak to the line coach. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I wanted to speak to the strength coach. And the strength coach happened to be Buddy Morris.
Okay, whose name I've heard.
Yeah, he was a part of Elite FTS. He spoke for us here yesterday. I ended up meeting him again many, many years later at Westside Barbell. So I'm talking to him and I'm giving him my lifts, and he's like, Dave, look, you are the strongest. You would come in here the strongest person I have. There's no doubt about that. I don't know what your skills are, but we definitely have the weight room to be able to suit all your needs. But from what I'm being told, because they passed this on beforehand, you don't have the grade point to get in here. So it's not going to happen. You got to play at another school and then maybe transfer in, but your height for this position, probably isn't going to happen. So I was like, okay, fuck. And so from that, after five years now of taking courses with no real purpose in mind, except don't fail it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, don't you think that's worthwhile though? Like just to get your confidence up.
Back
to say,
then,
now I could.
back then maybe, but now with the price of education, I would say no. But back then, yeah. And keep in mind, the whole time I am still helping to manage a gym or managing a gym. The bouncing was just, for extra income because it actually paid more than what the gym was. So I was getting experience. So at the very least, I'm thinking I can manage a health club or I can run a gym, do something along those lines. But all I need to do is graduate college. I don't give a shit what it's in. I just want to graduate. And after 5 years, I remember I started asking around, like, how many credit hours does it take to graduate? And the girlfriend I was with at the time, I think she said it was like 120 or 140 or something. Like, I don't even know how many I have. So I had to go to the administrator office and have everything printed out. And then we went to every college on campus and got their little, guide to what you had to take to graduate, and spent 3 hours just checking off different boxes on all these different, schools.
So you have like portions of all these
to
majors
figure out like
completed?
I might be graduated now, So we're like checking everything off. And I was one course away from graduating with a sociology degree. And I'm like, well, this is fucking interesting because I really don't know what you could even do with that. But all I really wanted to do was graduate. But obviously that's where my interests were, in sociology. And, why, I don't know. I mean, we can do a deep dive into that. Is it because, I was the social misfit? Like, why do people treat people the way that they do? And, there's a lot of different reasons to kind of go into that.
Well, and motivation for doing things and overcoming things, and where does that come from? And
the only problem was I had to take a foreign language, and I tried 4 times before then. And I couldn't do it because it's like 3 classes in one to me. You got to learn how to spell it, speak it, and conjugate it. It's like if it was just on spelling the words, I could probably pass it. If there were 3 different courses over a period of time, I could probably do it. I could not do it. And that's not a lazy thing. I tried, and I think I tried 4 times and dropped before you would, before the end date. And I'm like, there was no other option. That was it. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm transferring out of here. My grade point now is high enough because I never retook the courses I failed. All right, I was too scared to do that because that would fuck my GPA up. I knew I needed a 2.3 or 2.5 or whatever to graduate. So when it got to a point where I transfer, I transferred to the University of Toledo, met with the guidance counselors, and they're, what do you want to do? I'm like, I really don't know, but I love fucking powerlifting, and that's all I do. So it's what I'm the best at, and I want to be around it in some way, some capacity, the rest of all my life. And she said, well, what do you think you would need to be the best power lifter if you were to try to teach that skill to somebody? I said, I need, exercise physiology, I need kinesiology, I need biomechanics, I need psychology, I need communication skills, I need coaching skills. So I'm just rambling off all this stuff. I need nutrition, I need nutritional biochemistry, I need to know how it works in the body. I need all these different things. And she said, okay, we're going to create independent studies based upon exercise science and nutrition. laid it out. It says it's going to take you 2 years, to be able to finish these courses. But I really think you should go to Owens Tech, which is like a small tech school, and retake microeconomics and retake, what was the other class I failed? I think it was fucking algebra. Retake
algebra again. Yes, algebra.
Retake, these 2 courses. And I'm like, man, if I do that and I fail them, you're not going to let me back in here. And she said, if you don't do them, you're going to think you're a failure the rest of your life, so it's not going to matter if you come back in here or not.
Wow.
All right, so, I'm going to do this, but I'm only going to take one at a time. All right, and I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting in the microeconomics class and with all these other people, and I'm feeling like I'm sitting in a class and everybody else in the class are dumb fucks because they don't understand what the teacher's talking about. Like, this
was that like the first time? Was that one of the first times that you felt that way, or had you felt that way?
I felt that way many times,
Okay.
but it was just like the teacher was doing such a good job of explaining. It's not that hard. Mm-hmm. It's just I had a foreign teacher that you can't fucking understand, and I'm not reading the book because I'm training.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to read it all the last day before the test. And so I aced that. I'm like, holy, this is simple. Like,
wow.
Why did this disrupt my entire educational career? But then I always think, when I think stuff like that, I always think on the other end of the scale, how did this change the trajectory of my life? Because look where now I'm actually going to study what everybody told me I could never make money doing. Like, oh, you can't do that exercise shit. You can't make money doing that. You'll never make a career. You need to do the business. You need to do the business. And now I kind of put myself in a position where I had to do this. It's the only way I was going to be able to graduate. And I aced the other one, so went back to the guidance counselor, and she said, I told you. And I'm like, wow, how did you know? And this was the first time I ever had a guidance counselor that gave a shit.
Wow.
I'm like, well, how did you know that? She said, Dave, they're not that hard of classes. They really aren't. I'm like, well, why didn't you have me take them here? Smaller class size, more individual attention,
wow.
and so forth. And then from there, I went on to graduate with a 3.8. So I took nutritional biochemistry with no chemistry background, no nutritional background.
They didn't have a prereq or anything?
They did, but I didn't care.
Yeah.
The teacher signed me through.
Wow.
The counselor signed me through.
That's
I
great.
aced it. So at that point in time, I'm like, if I really, really like this shit, I can do it. I'm not going to say that it didn't take me a long time. I had to highlight, underline, rewrite things. It took me 5 times as long as it would take anybody else. But, I got through it and I did it.
And how long were you in school?
7 years.
7 years.
7 years for a bachelor's degree. But it was also 7 years to learn, how to overcome adversity in life, 7 years to figure out how to pivot, 7 years of experience learning how to run a gym, 7 years of knowing when you're in something too long, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And during the time I was in Toledo, to fast forward, is when I've known Louis Simmons since I was my first meet. He would give advice in warm-up rooms and just not like, hey, you're my best kid friend. It's just like, hey, tuck your elbows. It's just Louis being Louis. But I caught his attention when I was doing a couple meets during that period of time in Toledo, where he started saying, look, you need to come down and start training with us on the weekend. And so I started making trips from Toledo to Columbus to train.
At Westside.
At Westside. And that would have been around 1990.
Okay.
And then eventually ended up moving to Columbus for that reason. And my wife's girlfriend at the time, but wife, her family is from Columbus.
Okay.
So there was 2 reasons, but the only one that really mattered to me was Westside, because I became the strongest person in the gym. Anytime I became the strongest person in the gym, I knew it was time to find another gym.
Wow.
So I kind of moved on from there.
How did you meet your wife? Because you founded this company, Elite FTS, with your wife. And you've actually, in these Q&As, it's just so cute, and I've screenshotted it several times. People ask, if you could tell yourself 20 years ago, what would you tell them? And both times I think you've said, treat your wife better. and you have such a high respect for your wife. Where did you two meet?
In Bowling Green. And it was my roommate at the time was a national level bodybuilder, which, you know, I did a bodybuilding show while I was still there kind of because of him. And that taught me the discipline and taught me how to utilize some of the nutrition, but also taught me I really don't want to do bodybuilding. And then he did a powerlifting meet, and same thing kind of happened to him. You know, he did really well. He liked it, but he knew it wasn't for him. His girlfriend knew Tracy. So for some odd reason, I was training at the university weight room, which was 4 lifters. It wasn't the rec center. It was like 4 lifters. But to me, it was still, they weren't serious enough for me, which is why I was going to Toledo. But for some reason, if it was snow or whatever it was, we weren't able to make it to where we would normally go. So we trained there, and introductions were kind of made. But one of the funny stories with that was the pull down machine. I used to use all the weights on the stack, and then I would start like finding ways to hang 45-pound plates off the side of the stacks because it wasn't enough weight. And I would wear one of those handkerchiefs, like a do-rag, you know, over my head and tuck it through the back. You know, this is going way back, like complete 80s bodybuilding shit. You know, baggy pants with stupid, you know, pattern prints.
American flag pants, I hope.
I never wore the flags. I always wore the other stupid ones, though, because I'm like, the flags are dumb, but cheetah pattern, that's cool, you know. So, and they were always kind of like tapered down to the ankle, and if it didn't,
did they call those vanilla ice pants? Is that
kind of like that?
Okay.
And if they weren't tapered, you had to fold you had to fold it and then turn it and then fold it again, so it was kind of like a tuck type thing. And so I'm wearing this stupid shit with a boat neck sweatshirt because it's just kind of what you did.
Wow.
And I'm pulling on these pull downs, and, you know, she's in the back with Raquel was her name, you know, watching as we're training, and the fucking cable breaks. And I end up rolling over backwards off of the lat machine. You know, so that was our introduction. Like, after I break this, you know, Vinny's like, "Hey, man, you got to come over here. You got to meet her." And so then, and I'm thinking, this is awesome. She knows I'm strong as fuck. I just broke the machine, you know.
Okay.
Every girl's going to be impressed with this. You know, the do-rags had to help too. And,
and my cheetah pants.
Yeah. So he set up like a double date thing where we went to a movie, which I can't remember what it was. It was some Bill Murray thing. And then from there, you know, we just kind of hit it off and stayed together from that point on. So I maybe 90, oh man, we got married in 94, maybe 92. After so long, you start to forget, but it's, so it might have been 88, you know, is when we met, and that was it. You know, we just started dating from there, and I mean, I didn't have a whole lot of time, you know, because of training and the bouncing and all the other kind of stuff, but that's how we met, was from
And then
that.
you founded this. You founded Elite. What was that? What precipitated that?
It was a series of events. So when I was at Westside, after I got to Columbus, I ended up landing a job as a personal trainer in a corporate fitness facility. It was called the Capital Club at the time. So the best way to think about it is it was like a golf club or a golf course downtown without a golf course.
Okay.
So it was a dining. They were known for their dining, and that's where the lobbyists would take, you know, who they were lobbying. That's where the lawyers would take the business lunches and stuff like that. And then upstairs had a full squash courts and weight room and so forth. So I was hired to work there and spent 8 years working there. And while I was working there, I built my clientele up to the point where I was training clients from 5 in the morning till 10 at night. And the only time I didn't train clients is between 8 a.m. and 11:30 when I would leave to go train at Westside. And then I would come back and then train the clients the rest of the time. So I'd go from training Gen Pop exclusively to being with the strongest lifters in the world, and then going back and training Gen Pop. And I loved what I was doing. You know, I loved training, you know, Gen Pop, but with anything, there's always, you know, clients that you like far better than other ones. And that's just the nature of any business. I always say it doesn't matter what job you have, there's always going to be a certain percentage of that job that you just don't like.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are lucky if they have 10% of the job that they really, really love. If they have that, to keep it, because you could end up in a job that it's 100% that you don't like.
Yeah.
If you can build that out to where it's 30, 40, 50%, that's great, but it's never going to be 100% because there's always administrative stuff. And then if you can get past the administrative stuff, then you're going to have staff. Then with staff, there becomes a lot of pros with that, but there's also cons as well. So it's HR crap. So it just becomes business. So when I was with Louie, he taught me, again, it was another one of those times in my life where before I met him, I thought I knew everything about training. Then I met him and realized I didn't know anything about training. And so he mentored me, as well as being part of Westside, which was an experience in itself that spanned 14 years. I was helping him with seminars he was doing. I was helping him with consultations he was doing. Coaches were coming into town every weekend. So a lot of the times I'd hang around, just to listen, pick the mind. And that's where Buddy Morris comes back into the picture. I met him way back then, or actually we went to Pitt and I met Buddy there. And then he would come often. So Louie had coaches in there from the NFL. I think every NFL team over the period of the 14 years I was there, almost every single one of them visited.
Wow.
Or we went, one or the other. And it got to a point where he just kind of got tired of doing it. And I started doing the seminars for him and the consultations for him. And then that branched out to, he really didn't want anything to do with that. It's just, you just go ahead and do it. So that's where this entity started. At the same time, Tracy wanted to start trying to do personal training like in home. So she set up the business entity for that, and just it never really did anything. So while she trained at Westside for a few years as well. And she trained in the night crew. I was in the morning crew. One night she was in the gym complaining about her job, and she was social worker, long-term care facility, kind of like a manager, and just hated her boss and just kind of everything about it. And Louie asked her, why don't you just take over all the crap that I sell? And so we started talking like, well, I kind of really need a business entity here, to be able to, for this consulting stuff that I'm doing. So we were eventually going to have to set something up for that. I could file under my own name, but now we can file it under a different name, and which I wanted to do, which I'll explain why in a second. And then if we take over selling, and it wasn't a lot of product, it wasn't a lot of inventory. I'd say it may be $3,000 total, just small like man arrays and like a safety squat bar, just little. He just wanted to sell his videos and the reverse hyper, which is what he was known best for.
Okay.
And not have to worry about running to the post office to mail this out, mail this out, mail this out. So I'm like, well, hell, we'll run to the post office and do it. And realized real quick why he didn't like doing that. And but it wasn't a lot of product either. I mean, we're talking 1 to 3 packages maybe every 2 or 3 days. We go to the post office once a week and have maybe 5 packages at best. But during this time period, it was my first son was born, and I really realized that this isn't the way I want. This isn't. I rarely saw my dad because he worked all the time, and if it was, we need to go on vacation, well, we can't do that. The store's open Saturday and Sunday, so even weekend stuff. And he always made it to my football games, but, anything else, he was never there. It was retail, so he had to be there, and he was in the same position that a lot of other people are. He had one sales guy, and that was really it. So if he wasn't there, it had to be him, and if he called off, it had to be him. So I didn't want to be that.
And so far in the timeline, you're at Westside from 8 to 11, you said.
Yeah.
And your wife is there at night.
Yes.
And then in the middle, you're training. Did you see each other at all? When did you
when I got home,
see each other? Yeah.
Like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. If I had cancellations, it would be a little bit earlier. And the weekend, Sunday,
But then you throw your son into the mix, and then
and I realized I'm never going to see my kid. You know, and then I can't. I don't know how this is going to work. You know, because now with personal training, you have group training, you have all these different things. None of those things were really working. I tried some of them, and it just wasn't working at that time, or I didn't know how to sell it very well. And when I was working as a personal trainer, I was seen more as like I don't want to say a servant, but you know, say you got a housekeeper and you got you know, the guy that takes care of your car. You know, I'm just like this other guy, you know, and that's really all it is. And you know, now I think the role of that position has changed a little bit to where small group training and stuff like that works, but it wasn't working at the time. And I had staff underneath me as well, so and I was capped because I couldn't hire any more trainers underneath me because we were pretty much, I was completely full, you know, with my hours. The trainers underneath me, a couple were full, the other two weren't really full, but it was because of the membership. You know, it was a high, the average member's income was $250,000, $300,000. So it wasn't like there was a whole lot of members, and there wasn't a whole lot of turnaround on the members. So there's only a certain percentage of the members that are going to be interested before you have to start using hard sales techniques, which is not going to work with the CEO of a bank.
Right.
You know, if you try, you're going to lose. You know, their negotiation skills are better. So all these kind of things were all coming together at the same time. And then the consulting started to expand a little bit more. And I had a really good relationship with the manager of the overall club, not just the health club, but the overall club, and spoke to him and told him that I wanted to move my position to an independent contractor. And he didn't understand why, because when the way I was paid, when you're commissioned and then you had administrative hours, and then there were 10 or 15 overtime hours, my overtime rate was ridiculous. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was like $72. It was ridiculous. And so he's like, why would you do that, you know, when you're making, you know, what you're making? And I told him of the consulting, and I told him of that. And I said, the only way I'm going to be able to actually build this and be able to get to a position to where I'm not going to be working all day in the same place. Like, the hours don't bother me. I still work a lot of hours now. The location does. You know, like when it's 80 hours in the same location, that's a problem. If it was, you know, some hours at home, you know, some hours at Barnes and Noble or whatever, where I still work, you know, the same number of hours. And he got it, and then he appreciated what I was telling him, because what I was telling him is, you know what, I'm still going to be here. So if somebody needs anything, they can always ask me a question, but I might be in the back office, you know, building a system or building, you know, a seminar for the next client I have to work with. And I do not feel comfortable doing that on your dime. You know, I don't want to use your phones, you know, on your dime, you know, but I still had to use their phones because we didn't have cell phones. We had pagers. And so we set it all up. It's like, yeah, that's cool. You can use this office. You can do this. You can do this to try to keep your clients around this point in time. Help me try to find another trainer to be able to come in. And I was basically a break even for the club because of the way I negotiated everything over a period of time. They were making money on the trainers underneath me, but I was a flat break even. So whatever I was bringing in, they weren't profiting on. And so he's also seeing that as well. Like, I can replace you with somebody else and then actually profit on that other person, because when I came in, they had $4,000 a year of personal training. You know, within the first year, it was over $200,000. Wow. So so he appreciated that, but he also became a mentor because of that. So then when I had, you know, free time and I didn't have anything to do, we just sat and talked business. It's like, well, what would you do? You know, because we're trying to figure out, you know, you have to have multiple streams of income no matter what you're doing. So if I left to set up a training center, well, what else am I going to have? Because the training center would, if it was a sport training center, would have seasonality. So what are you going to do when it's slow? Shit, I don't know. And then he pulled in some of my best clients. And for a couple hours, we just sat around a table and we just started brainstorming things like, what do you really want to do? Like, I want to help people become stronger. Well, how many people? Well, as many as I can. Well, do you understand that's limited? Like, you do that here, but it's limited to the 80 clients, 100 clients that you have here. If you had your own facility, it's going to be limited to that. Is there a way that you can do this in a more broad sense? And I'm like, well, I am answering a lot of questions, online, through this deepsquatter.com site. So maybe something.
Is that the first place that you kind of were on online?
Yeah. When I first got a computer, the first thing you're searching is this. And I saw there's a Q&A about Westside Barbell. And a lot of the answers they weren't correct. They weren't totally wrong, but they also weren't what we were doing. So I reached out to the guy and said, do you need a little help here? Because I am in the club. I've been here for a long time. I know exactly what we do. I actually give seminars on it. So that's how it started. And then it was all HTML. So he started to hate it because my spelling sucks. So he had to fix my grammar and my spelling and then add all the HTML. And there's no WordPress. Just straight HTML. So it'd take a week to be able to put up the one page, that he was doing. And then I ended up doing a seminar from that, a question that somebody saw on that page that called. And I went to do the seminar, and it was in South Carolina. And driving to dinner after the seminar, somebody in the back seat had said, have you ever thought about having a website? And I said, well, I kind of have one now. He's like, well, no, you don't. What you have is called a banner site. It's like it's a page and it's got a list of your products. I said, that's not a
banner
website.
Site. Is that what they called them instead of a landing page?
Yeah,
now
it was just a banner. Yeah, it was just a banner site. It's just very, very simple. Nothing clickable. It's just there it is. And I'm like, I can't really afford anything. So I got a buddy that's working on something right now. And it ended up being like a forum, but it wasn't a forum, it was a Q&A. And I'm like, well, yeah, fuck. If I'm going to be a beta test thing, it's not going to cost me anything. I'll be more willing to do that.
Yeah.
So the site started as a Q&A. Okay. So when people see all the Instagram AMAs and like, oh man, this is amazing, I can't believe you're doing that. It's like, you guys, you don't know the history here, man. I've been answering, 500 to 1,000 questions per month since 1998.
Jeez.
It's just the median changes. And there were a couple years where there wasn't one, where when we moved to the new site, we had a Q&A on there and it just didn't pop because social media.
Yeah.
Social media took that aspect away, and it just now with this AMA on Instagram kind of brought it back. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Now I got this back. I can do this again and be able to fill that and put that back in there. But it's been going on since forever. And then people through those, through that Q&A starts asking, well, where do I get these bands? Where do I get these books? Soviet training manuals and all the other stuff. And I would give the referrals. And then, so I'm telling this to my clients, right? And they're all business people. And they're looking at each other like, are you fucking stupid? And it's like, you understand that you could sell those things, right? And
you're already selling Louis' stuff, right? The few
almost.
Okay.
We were considering it.
Okay.
All right, but now all of a sudden it's all coming together. It's like, no, wait a minute. Louis just asked my wife.
Okay.
About these, and these, and people are asking about these, and these, and they're like, well, can you add a store to this? I don't know. I got to ask the guy that's doing the website for me for free if he can build a store for free. And he's like, yeah, what the hell? And back then, I think his goal was, let me build this store. And then once I have a store, I can lease the store out, to other people, not our store, but you know what I'm saying? The software, lease it out. And then him being a programmer, be able to, make his money off of that. And that's what his original goal was. So he built our store, and he's an amazing programmer. We still use him today. He will be a part of my company until forever in one way or another. Even if we bring in all in-house, which we probably never will do because you can't, that's a huge cost to bring in everything from front end to back end and everything in between.
But you do have a pretty significant staff.
For media.
In-house, yeah,
yes,
okay.
for media.
Okay.
But when you're dealing with, any website,
Yeah.
you're going to have UX, then you're going to have front end, then you're going to have back end, then you're going to have, debugging, and then some things can be contractors. Back end doesn't necessarily need to be full-time, but it probably should be, because that's if something's really going to go wanky and knock you out, that's what it's going to be. Front end, you kind of need full-time, especially if you're e-commerce, because you're going to be changing the front page, pretty frequently. And now the WordPress and the content, stuff like that, that can be a contractor person. If something fucks up, you just call them and they fix it. It's not that hard, or you Google it and figure out how to fix it. But he was game, and that's how the store started. So it all started from Q&As, out of just wanting to help people become stronger.
And that's been something that you've been passionate about, and that's I think probably one of the main things that anyone would take away from you if they spend any amount of time watching your stuff, listening to your talks. You have this attitude of, I think you call it benevolence in one of your chapters, going back to those guys in the gym, right, that poured into you and answered your questions. What else contributed to this? I mean, I think you gave a talk just this weekend, because my husband was at your summit, about giving for no reason at all, giving without anything in coming back to you. You may not make money off of it. How does that play into what you're doing now?
If I want to be 100% forthright, I mean, we just came off of Easter, right? Somebody gave for me the ultimate sacrifice, right? So if you want to talk about giving back, I'm already forgiven for any sin, that I would create, and that's expecting nothing in return, so if you want to know where it originally originates from, that's.
And did you grow up in a faith-based household?
Multiple, so I grew up under a different. So it was Methodist for a while, and then it was Baptist for a while, and then it was like nothing for a while. And it wasn't until, I got older and really started to get hit with hard adversity that I started wondering, like, what's the real thing going on here? What's the big picture? Because it's always easy to look back, right? You can't look forward, but you can look back. You can kind of connect the dots, but you're still doing that with some sort of prejudice. But that's, I mean, that yes, it's there. Faith it's a big part of my life, and it's a weird thing, because online you got to be careful about how you say that, because you're going to end up being slammed. But even regardless of whatever somebody feels their religious base is, if it's even none at all, faith is still faith. Faith is still believing in something that you don't know is real, right? So to me, you have to have that to survive in life, because how else are you going to get through adversity? I mean, shit gets hard sometimes. So I've never ever thought that, and it can be hard. I've never thought through the hardest times that, this is it. It's always like, what, it sucks and it's hard, but at some point in time, it's going to be okay. So that's when I speak faith, that's the ultimate faith, right, is knowing that, it'll be okay. Not everything happens for a reason. I can't justify that, because I don't even know if I believe that. All right. But things are going to be okay, So if you have the faith that everything's it may take time, that helps you get through, some of the darkest times. It helps you get through darker times than you got through before, because you never know what the future is going to bring. Part of the whole live, learn, pass on thing I talk about is with the live part, you can't predict the future, but you can prepare for it. And you can't change the past, but you can learn from it. But you can live in the present, which you should pay attention to, because this is a moment, right? We've met each other and so forth. Who knows what that's going to mean 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I had a presenter, buddy who said in his presentation that I've known for 30 years, and he has a daughter that's been waiting for, was it a liver or?
Something serious like that. I'm not positive.
I'm pretty sure it's a liver transplant that she was diagnosed when she was 3. You know, she's 33, so she's been living with this for her whole life. She hadn't had a bad life. She played sports. She did really, really well. But I mean, imagine living with that your whole entire life, knowing that this eventually is going to happen and it's going to come. And the only way it's going to come is when it gets so bad that they have to. Well, we believe that happened this week. So he sent a message saying, you know, to Alicia, who runs our events, that his daughter's in the hospital in the Cleveland Clinic, and she's stable. He's still going to come, but he's just going to speak, and then, you know, he's going to leave. And I'm looking at his message, and I'm like, man, I need to tell him, because I know him fairly personally from 30 years. I need to tell him, dude, I got this. You don't need to come. But something said, no, don't do that, because he's going to be mad if I do, because he's made a conscious choice that this is what he wants to do. So maybe it's a distraction.
Sure.
You know, and if things got worse, there's no doubt, you know, he would have left, right? So he gets in, and I'm sitting in the back, and he starts speaking, and the first thing he says is, the only reason I'm here is because of Dave and what he did when him and Louie came down and spoke to me at the University of Pittsburgh, because it changed the way I saw training, which ended up changing my entire life. Okay? Had I spent that time down there with him, focusing on all the past experiences that I had with coaches that I thought sucked, I wouldn't have been able to be present, to be able to pay attention to what he was saying, to be able to give feedback to him. Nor had I been focusing on the future, like, man, I really need to build a relationship with this guy, because maybe someday he might buy a weight room from me. Then I wouldn't have been able to be present with him. The feeling of, I can't even explain the feeling of humbleness, you know, and gratitude that I had in that moment, you know, of him saying that, you can't put a value on. You know, so if you take, say our value in the way that we earned a living was kind of like a video game where you got the little power meter.
Oh, yeah.
You know how it comes up, comes down. All right, let's say we removed money, but everybody lived based upon where that power meter was. That power meter becomes at its fullest when you give and when you help somebody. Think of how you feel when you help somebody and they truly appreciate it. You know, or when you give them a gift that they really like that they didn't expect. It's like, you know, it's all the way there. Think about how you feel when you give a gift and you're doing it, and you know, okay, if I send this out, then maybe I'll get a client return. It's like down here. So in that present, you want to try to fill the power meter, you know, because in time, to me, that's what's going to matter, right? Because that's the only way you really feel connection, contribution, and love. And those are my driving forces. You know, it's, you know, underneath that, you know, using Tony Robbins, you know, 6 human needs, you know, there's certainty or uncertainty. I definitely fall in the uncertainty. You know, things are too certain, I'm going to get bored. You know, meanwhile, I'm going to bitch while it's uncertain. But
self-employment.
You know, yeah, I mean, the top needs are, you know, contribution and growth. And contribution is, you know, my biggest thing from that standpoint. So when it comes to the whole passing on and the giving, there's those 2 components that are really big for me. And then from the industry standpoint, you have an industry that when I came into it, as I said, with the education part, that I didn't know what to do because there were no professions for that. All I knew was to take classes for it. And I don't want to go back and say I had faith that there would be something, because, I didn't even know if I cared.
Sure.
I just wanted to be the best lifter I could, which doesn't pay anything.
Yeah.
You know, I just figured, I mean, you're young, so you're like, you know what, I'll figure it out. I'll figure that out later. But all those people, from those guys in the gym that my dad dropped me off at the first time, to the coaches I gave the examples of, to, you know, when I went to Toledo, there was George Crawford and Bob Wall, which nobody's going to know, but they were former world champions. You know, they helped me tremendously with technique and powerlifting and so forth. And then there's Louis Simmons, and then, you know, there's Buddy Morris, and then I just keep going down the line. There's all these people that helped me, you know, with training. And then there's a list of people that kind of helped me with business. It's just as advice and so forth, that they never charged me anything. So I kind of feel I owe it to them to be able to pass on, you know, to other people, because if we don't do that, it's kind of the example that I use in the seminars is it's planting seeds. So we have people today in the fitness industry that are planting seeds, and they're like waiting for the seeds to grow. And they're watering it a little bit, but they're getting pissed because they don't see anything growing. And so they'll water a little bit more, and damn. Then maybe they pull a rake out, they'll rake it a little bit because maybe the seeds weren't deep enough, and then they water a little bit more. Like, damn. Then I was like, fuck, I need to take a rest now. So then they'll lean against the tree, you know, that's behind them. And then they'll come out, water a little bit more. Then they figure, you know what, maybe it's not growing because I'm in a forest. You know, there's not enough sun, so they'll plant seeds someplace else, you know, and damn, you know, it's not growing, you know, so they say, fuck it, and they go fall asleep and take a nap in the shade of the biggest tree that's there. And what they don't realize is the forest that they're in was built by the seeds the people over here planted 30, 40, 50 years ago, when there was no such thing as a personal trainer or a strength coach or an online coach, you know, and this is in every industry. It's in retail.
Yeah.
You know, there was no internet retail.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, I don't want to go back to where the root of that all started, but anybody that knows internet retail knows what the first internet retail actually was. But anyhow, you know, these guys here were doing it for the love of wanting to help other people. And because of that, they ended up creating this forest that people today are actually making really great livings in, you know, and they're trying to give back, you know, they're trying to help, but then they get frustrated and they just say, fuck it. I'm worth more than this. You know, I get paid X per hour. I'm not going to answer your question. You know, you hire me. I'm not going to look at your training video. I have a business for that. Send it to my business email. You know, I'm not going to answer your question. You know, I'm not going to answer your DM. You know, this is how I earn my living, as training people. So what they realize is they're actually lying concrete. All right, which makes me wonder, what is there for my kids? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If they're laying concrete, what's down there? All right, so part of the reason why Elite FTS does what it does, and what I've always done, is to be able to put education out there for free, right? We put out massive amounts of education material. We have over 1 million pages that's gone out for 20 years. And that's all been supported by producing the highest quality equipment and products that we can, that we use to bring to market to help coaches and athletes become better. And at the same time, the better that does, and the more of our products go out into the market, the more that our brand is seen, if they're using our brand logo instead of theirs, and the more revenue it can generate, that allows us to put out more free content.
More free content.
You know, so it's not just buying a power rack or buying a pair of knee wraps or buying this. What it's actually doing is helping us to keep putting out more education. So in a way, from the live, learn, pass on standpoint, the people that have learned from Elite FTS for the past 10, 15, 20 years, by them purchasing and supporting the stuff that we put out, is allowing the newer coaches to have the same opportunity that they had, to have access to the best, most current information, so they can become, the same thing that they have. So in a way, I'm trying to not lie concrete.
Right.
I'm providing a way that allows them to plant seeds, from that standpoint, because my biggest expense after cost of goods sold is media department, which we essentially, from a profit and loss standpoint, make no profit on. That's going back into there. So that's the live, learn, pass. That's the passing on part. That's the part that really matters. And the last part of that is, it doesn't have to be a huge, big moment. It can be one coach walking in the dark that sees a kid running the stairs in the darkness that just says, why are you doing this? And the kid says, because I don't want to be beat again, and then follows up with, if you keep doing this, you'll never get beat. You know what I'm saying? That's it. One sentence, right?
One question on an AMA.
One question, one answer, that you put out there can be the answer that changes the trajectory. It may not change their life, but if you change the trajectory just a notch over a period of years, look at the difference that actually ends up going into. It ends up being a completely different outcome, and that's why I do what I do, and it drives me. It's always been that way. And if somebody was to dig deep to try to figure out why, I don't know. I really don't. It's not validation, because I don't care if they know me or if they know the brand. So I got team members that, it's just, I love the sport, the strength sport so much. And it's not just powerlifting, it's powerlifting, strongman, strength and conditioning, all the strength sports, and basically anybody that puts strength as one of their top 4 priorities, so much that I don't ever want to see somebody come into that and not be able to get help.
Well, imagine if you had come into it in all the other areas of your life, you didn't feel like you felt isolated and alone. And imagine if you had also come into this activity and weren't met with open arms, and
I'd
you
be
were
in jail.
Yeah.
I either would have killed myself or been in jail. I mean, at the point in my life at that time, it would have been one of those two things. I'm 100% certain on that. It wouldn't have been stumbling through being in a factory. And that being in a factory is not a bad thing. So even if I was to rewind the story, even those things that those people did up until that point would have been able to put me in the factory to be able to know I need to work my ass off, and then may have been able to be, at a management level, not inside the office, that doesn't require a degree. There's no doubt in my mind, so that's just being present, and I don't want to knock on cell phones and all this other kind of crap, because there's ways you can be present with people, on cell phones and things like that as well. But those things, I think that's why we're put here, is to help other people. Ultimately, I don't see any other reason why we're put on this earth. Are we put here to kill each other? I hope not. So if we're not here to kill each other, are we here to be selfish? I really don't think that would be it either. And if you look through, virtues, and you look through the right stuff, in the Bible, to throw it out there for just reference material, you're going to see it's laid right out. So, when people quote certain books and you go and you look at these motivational books and you look at what they're actually saying and you look at, it's like, okay, I actually know where I read this first.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
I was in like third grade in a Bible study course. It's just now been, repurposed, words changed, but the message is still the same. So it's kind of going back to the original source. If you believe or don't believe, the text is still kind of telling you, the best way to live your life. If you hire a life coach, it's the same. Yeah. It's the same thing.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Dave Tate as a dad, because you mentioned your son was born. Both of your sons are adopted?
Yes.
And I think I remember the story you said at one point that, was it your first son where the mom said to take care of him as you're carrying him out of the hospital? How did it change once you became a dad?
Well, it changed everything. That moment was just right there. That was a defining moment for me, because it was, going back to the whole giving standpoint, you got some people that won't loan somebody a quarter to make a phone call. And I think that's what I wrote in the book. And this lady knew she couldn't take care of this child and gives away a life. It's amazing. It's like, and sometimes I want to go into a rant, like, you seriously can't answer somebody's fucking training question, right? This person gave away a fucking life, and so, and that's all she asked, and I think if it was a natural born child, I'd probably feel the same way, but I don't have the reference for that. But it hit me hard, and that's why I went back, and all of a sudden I'm looking at my work schedule and I'm like, this I can't fulfill this promise doing this. This isn't going to work. I have to find a way to change this. And there is no such statement as there's no way. There's always a way. It's just you may not see it right away. There's always somehow to be able to do it. It just takes time to be able to figure out what that's going to be, and faith that it's going to be okay. Like, okay, I know I want to be able to see my son. I want to see him step. I want to see him crawl. I want to see him walk. I want to see all these things that for the first time that I know for a fact most parents miss, but babysitters see. It's like, I don't want that to be the case. How can I make this happen to where I can work from home? And then if I miss it, it's just because I was answering an email and it's like, oh shit, I can live with that, because at least I'll see the second one. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm going to come home and have a babysitter say, hey, Blaine made his first step today. Be like, fuck. I don't, that's not filling that promise, and it's not just that promise. It was how I wanted to be as a father, because my father, while he loved me tremendously, he gave me great advice, and he didn't beat me. He just wasn't present. I wanted to be one that's present, so I'm still home when they get off the bus. When he gets off the bus, I'm still home. And my oldest has autism, so he may come home and then go down and take a nap for an hour, and then come back up and work on his computer and do whatever he does for an hour. And then we'll have dinner, whatever it is. And he is verbal, but he just won't say anything. That's fine. I got my laptop. I'm just doing whatever. I'm just doing my work. But maybe on that third or fourth day, it happens every week, maybe every couple of weeks. He comes in, he sits down on the couch. He's like, man, you know what happened today? And it's like, now what if I wasn't there?
Yeah.
If I get home later, he's not going to say, hey, guess what happened today? So that's the benefit of being present, going back to the importance of that.
And we are actually talking in April, the very tail end of April, which is Autism Awareness Month. And you've been so open this month about talking about your son and how just all of the ways that it's kind of brought new ways of looking at things in your own life. Do you see any sort of parallels between the way that your childhood was with feeling isolated, difficulty in school, and how has that influenced the way that you've raised your son?
It was bad at the beginning. It was really bad. That's because through his, he was nonverbal for a while. So, as we were going through early intervention and all the other stuff, he was in a Catholic school for a year. Before that, he was in like a preschool type thing. And working in the school systems was very hard for me because I was seeing the same shit. So Tracy helped me a lot during this time because I was having a hard time separating myself from him. It's like, I know this shit and it's not going to happen to him, but it led to a lot of anger, and it led to a lot of quick conclusions. The biggest being, no, he is not going to be labeled autistic. I know what it's like to be labeled learning disabled. He is not going, fighting that hard, until finally, one of the one of the teachers or psychologists, somebody finally kind of got through and said, if you don't embrace this, basically said, this isn't like when you were young. If you don't embrace this, you're not going, you will not get the help that you need. He will not have an individual education he won't have an IEP. He needs that IEP. And I can't disagree with that. It's like, hell yes, he needs the IEP.
Which, for people who don't know, IEP, individual education program.
Yes.
So that they have sort of a unique way that they are learning things.
Yes. So in some cases, it could just be the kid can't take a class without anxiety or take a test without anxiety in the classroom. So they'll create an IEP where maybe he can take the class in a different room or maybe even in the hallway.
Okay.
That's just one example of many. What it allowed us to be able to do, because his behavior is, his education is, kind of through the roof, but his behavior is delayed or, aggressive, and he, it's learning how to control his emotions and his behavior. That's the problem. So for us, it ended up eventually there's a school for autism that this allowed us to be able to get him to the school for autism, and still it's not, I guess you could say it's a private school, but it's not, because it's covered under tax dollars, and it's what you pay your taxes for. But without the IEP and without all the things that you have to do as a parent, you really like, I don't really want to do this. We wouldn't be able to have him in the school, or we wouldn't be able to have the transportation for him in the school. And the school is the best thing that's ever happened to him, because class size is 6. If he has a meltdown or throws a fit, they just remove him from the classroom, take him into another room, help him settle down, bring him back in, and then everything's fine. It's, he has that in public school. He's going to be suspended for, in-school suspension, then out of school. So he'd be suspended all year long, and then they work with him on, here's how you go about coping skills, and here's how you do that. And then the education's there. It's never has homework. His work is done faster than everybody else. And and so from that standpoint, that was where that clashed. It clashed a lot. The rest of it, I think, kind of helped from the standpoint that, I kind of know, but I don't, though, because I don't know how he thinks. And that's part of, autistic kids.
One of these videos was talking about, he has a trainer that works with him. And you were talking about squatting. And you love squatting. You thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I don't know if you said you couldn't figure out why he didn't like it or something, but eventually it kind of clicked that when he sees, and certainly the people that you have squatting in this facility are squatting a lot of weight. He's not around some hobbyist, guys in a random gym. He's seeing guys that are bleeding from the forehead because they are squatting so much weight. And to him that translates as, pain. I don't want to do that. Right. And so I'm sure that is just like throughout his life, you've noticed these things that suddenly there's just a massive difference in the way in which you're looking at the same thing.
And he sees things obviously differently. And because he's adopted, I guess it kind of throws another little ring in there because, genetically you can kind of think, parents kind of think a little bit alike, so that's why you'll hear, you'll at some point in time, you'll start saying the same things that your mom said and you don't really know why. It's just kind of that little connection that's in there. Where I don't have that, and it's kind of a good thing because it's a constant process of discovery and trying to figure out what he really needs, what he really wants, and so forth. And that's no different than with my other son from that standpoint. But from the training issue, my fear with both of them is Blaine needed it because there's sensory processing disorder. So there's communication or coordination, balance, things like that needed to be developed and have been developed. So it helped at an early age, but it had to be fun. And, I wasn't able to make it fun because I'm dad. So even though I'm trying to make it fun, it's really not. Even if I brought him in by himself, it really wasn't. He just wanted to play his video game. Sheena had a background in this and kind of picked up on it and kind of jumped in and was able to help, tremendously. So she works with him once a week, and then he comes in with us on Sunday and has breakfast with all the people who train, and comes out and does his own thing. His form still isn't great, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that. If he can go through, do all the exercises, make sure he's covering everything he needs to cover, then he's doing it. And for me, training changed my life, completely changed my life. Training I want that to be something, it may not change their life, but I want it to be something that is an opportunity that they can use to be able to cope with stress. If they ever get into compromised health, we'll be able to use it to be able to increase their health. I want it to be a tool that they don't hate. So I will never force that on them. And there's the other part of me of, it's what I know best. So the greatest gift I can really give them outside of love is to be able to teach them how to train. So I don't want to blow that. So if it takes till they're 21 and they're like, man, I really want to learn how to work out, I'll be there. I'll wait for that. I'd rather wait for that than try to force them as a 15 or 16-year-old to try to come in to get strong just so they can, be the baddest person in school, be the person that nobody's going to fuck with. And, I don't want them to have to train under the same pretenses that I've had to train under. And fortunately, they haven't had to grow up with those same type of circumstances. But everybody grows up with their own circumstances. It's just, as a parent, do you understand what your kid's circumstances are or not? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's a question any parent can ever answer. Because, when I wrote, the second book, Raising the Bar, which is more from a dark place than the first one, my mom and dad had no clue. And it's like, okay, well, sorry.
So they read the book and they were like, whoa.
Yeah, like, what the fuck? We didn't know this. And they didn't even know things from the first one, as far as the beating, my tooth was knocked out because somebody hit me in the face with a bat. I told them that I was walking the dog and it drugged me across the street and my mouth hit a curb and knocked the tooth out. So they didn't know, they had no idea. They had no clue. So it's, what I didn't want to do, go home and tell them about it, so I just either just didn't go home, and just went and stayed under a tree or, found some place where I could just chill out and just stay in my own head. And then they think that I'm over at a friend's house and then come home. And I don't know, looking back, if I would change that or not, because I learned how to be in my own head, where I know a lot of people that need to really learn how to get in their own head a little bit better than what they do. And so I kind of learned that at a young age.
Well, it's difficult, that line of regrets. I mean, certainly there are things I wish I could do over, but then what would that have affected, my college experience is where I met my husband. It's where, so I wouldn't want to change that, but at the same time, there's some things I wish I would have done differently, and where is that line?
Yeah. Yeah, and to go back to that, because we got sidetracked there, to go back to the original question of why do I write my biggest regret, if I was to change anything, it would be how I treated my wife, okay? That answer will never change, and it's been the same way for maybe 6 or 7 years now, and it will always be the same.
Do you feel like you treated her poorly?
I know I did. Yeah, I know I did. We went through a really rough patch, and a lot of things were exposed, through counseling or through her just flat out telling me that she wanted a divorce, and that, the first 10 years of her marriage were terrible. I still have to live with that. Okay, so I can do all in my power to try to make up for it, but you can't replace 10 years. I can't change the 10 years. I can't. I can't change the things that I did, and I was never physically abusive, but they're most definitely, thinking back, I was mentally abusive. I certainly was not present, because powerlifting was my number one priority. My son was born, I slept downstairs. I didn't want the baby waking me up. I needed my sleep to be able to train. Now, I can make the argument that if I played in the NFL, probably nobody would ever have a problem with that story.
Sure, yeah.
All right, but when it's powerlifting, people are going to have a problem with that story. It doesn't matter if people have a problem or not have a problem. What matters is what she thought about it. And so, after X amount of years, and even her telling me during that time frame, she really didn't know walking down the aisle if it was the right decision. So it's like, damn, this is, we've been together a long fucking time, and then when you hear it, it's just like a knife, in your heart that you just can't take back. And fortunately, we made it through that, and our relationship is probably better than it would have been had none of that happened. So, it's 5 times better than it was, but I'm not going to sit there and say that those 10 years were great because it's 5 times better now. I regret that. I should have never been like that, because had I not been like that, looking back now, had I not been like that, had I not been so fucking selfish about everything, and was more present and inclusive and so forth, then I may have done better in the sport, because I would have had more support. I would have had support from my biggest fan. So what I did is I took my biggest fan and made it my biggest hater, in that whole process. So, I don't regret the training. I don't regret the injuries. I don't regret, the fact that it took longer to get through school, or slower to grow a business, or any of those other things associated with when you're all in to one thing. And the balance is tipped so far that it's all into one thing. I don't regret all those other things, but that I do.
You do.
I do, and I always will. And balance it's a weird, I don't believe it exists, but it's
because there is a lot of talk about like work-life balance, and there have been some people who have said, I don't know that that's necessarily possible, or that it exists.
I don't think it exists. I think it's being present. If people are really honest with themselves, truly honest, and they're entrepreneurs, or they're people that are dealing with this work-life balance thing, when they're working, are they working, right? Or are they working for a half an hour and like, oh, I wonder what's on IG, or I wonder what's on Facebook, or, they get distracted for 15 minutes and go back. Are they working the whole time? Because I very rarely have seen anybody that works for 4 hours straight. Okay? So a lot of times what you'll see is if people are rested and they're focused, they can knock out more work in 2 hours than they can normally knock out in 8. Unless it's something like, audio editing or video editing. I mean, there's just no way to rush that process, because if you do, you're going to fuck it up and make it take even longer. But a creative process where it requires focus anything that's just repetitive administration type of work, all that with being present can get done faster, right? So now you don't have that 60-hour work week. It's actually 40 because you're actually present when you're working. So when you're with your husband, are you actually present? So I don't, this quality time, the quality time to me is bullshit. It's quantity, you know, because using my son as an example, okay, I can have quality time. I can take him to the zoo, right? But I got to be home 4 days before I get one day where we actually have dialogue. All right, when we have dialogue, we're building a relationship. All right, a husband and wife that's been together for a long period of time, maybe it is, you know, you're sitting in bed for 2 hours watching some stupid Netflix thing every night for, you know, 2 weeks. But on one of those nights out of the 2 weeks, you actually have a very engageful conversation about something maybe neither one of you really wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But it happened, and the only other way it would have happened is somebody saying, hey, look, we have to talk about this, which puts one on the defensive.
Right.
And then
That's
it's
never
not
a good,
and that's not a good conversation. Where that quantity time opens the opportunity to be able to say, you know, I was thinking about, you know, and it's in a more relaxed tone, and both parties know that you're there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's a huge thing. If you're there in the same room, it's a huge thing. You know, be in the same house, be in one room, have the other person be in the other room, and then compare that to what it feels like when you're both in the same room. It's two entirely different things. So, and training the same way. You know, if you go in the gym to train, you know, you go in the gym, train, here's what you want to do, you do it, you get it done, and you get out. All right. And, you know, music is probably the same way. You got a creative process that you need to be able to focus on. You got to be able to go on there. People need to shut the fuck up, get out, let the focus happen. If it's not there, leave. Just leave. Because when you're driving down the street, maybe it comes, turn around, go back into the studio, bam, hit it. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't force a lot of that creative process. And I think people try to do that. And then they end up wasting hours and hours.
Well, that was one of my biggest issues with working in a corporate sort of environment, is that you were expected to be there for 8 hours. And because I did find if I went to a coffee shop and I just took an hour and just chilled, took a walk, I could come back and work very focused for a good 3 hours, right? And that's a long time. But when you're forced to be in a place for 8-9 hours a day, the employer's kind of thinking, I want you here. You're here to work. So if you're just like standing in, you know, water cooler talk, whatever, that was one of my biggest issues, why I eventually decided I kind of have to do something else, because this just isn't realistic.
So that's from an employer standpoint, that becomes, it's a very hard balance, because you can go very lax, right? Say you're paying somebody salary, which salary should, expectation is 38, 40 hours, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, just, you know, go do whatever, you know, whatever you need to do to be able to get it done. And then you start looking and you find out that you're paying 30. You know, it's 30 hours, 30 hours, 30 hours, 30 hours.
Yeah.
And then you add it up over a period of a quarter, and you could have hired a whole other employee. All right. Meanwhile, you got people that may be complaining about having too much work. And it's like, well, I can hire another employee, or you can actually work. Yeah. You know, the time. So it's a hard thing to dial in. And it's been a process that we've been trying to dial in for 20 years, you know, to be able to fit. So it does become a little bit individualized, you know, per person, kind of based upon what's getting done and what's not getting done. And, you know, it's hard. Let's just put it that way. It's hard because a certain degree of freedom is great, you know, for creativity. But if it extends too much, then the creativity actually just stops, you know, and it just becomes coffee and donuts, you know, or whatever it's going to be. Right. But it takes time to kind of figure out. But if it's, you know, some people, it's going to lead into, you know, the being an entrepreneur, you know, where Jim would have been an example of that. leading into the own thing, and you hope that, if they've been around the company enough and you've been transparent enough, they kind of know what they're getting into, because it's never what you think it is when you go out on your own.
Nope.
No, because you realize, oh shit, now I got to have 10 hours, 15 hours of all this crap that I really hate to do. I thought I was just going to be doing this stuff, but it doesn't work that way. So
yeah. From a business perspective, you've put a lot of emphasis on reading and reading business books. And you mentioned 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I'm not kidding you, is probably the 5th time someone's, in my interviews for this next season, it's like the 5th time this book has been brought up. Brilliant. And full disclosure, I haven't gotten through the first 4 habits because it's so...
You can't.
Somebody told me once to get the teens version of it, and it's a whole lot easier.
No, you get the audio version.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I couldn't read it either. When I first read it, it's like, I tried to read it, I'm like, no, fuck this, I'm not doing it. And then I got the audio version, and then I'm like, okay, I can get through this. I got that. The problem that I have when it comes to business and business education, I always refer people to just business 101 textbooks. Just find used textbooks. They're still expensive as hell, but find used textbooks and learn the language of business. So I'm sure, I'm not a musician, but I'm sure there's a certain language with musicians that you kind of need to know just to be able to communicate with each other. In training, there's a certain language basic that you need to communicate with each other. Well, in business, that's also there as well. But trade books are trade books for a reason. They're put on the shelf to sell. They're not really put on the shelf to educate people. They're put on the shelf to sell first, educate second. Every now and again, there'll be a book that really is good, and that's why people will refer it, because it's like, oh wow, this one was really good. I probably have gone through at least 1,000 business trade books, and after, the first few years in business, that's all I did, because I didn't know what else to do, because nobody was calling in orders, so I'm just reading through.
Do you have like a top 5 list of or not, maybe not even the top 5, but just a few highlights?
For me, the 48 Laws of Power has always been one that resonated with me for some reason. I can't really explain why. The 7 Habits, of Highly Effective People is another one. Think and Grow Rich would be another one. But none of these are really for their entirety of what's in it. Just more what you take away from it is kind of what I'm saying. Because I could say another one that was really influential for me was Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard, which is just a short parable, and it's about customer service. And there's another one called Fish. I forget who the author of that is, and that's another one that's it's more like a management type of book, and it's another fable story that when you read them, a lot of the things like Think and Grow Rich, it's kind of a motivating type thing. It's like, okay, I got it. And the 7 Habits are like, okay, I get this. I mean, you can kind of just read what the 7 habits are and kind of figure out what it means. Begin with the end in mind. That's not that hard to figure out, right? So a lot of them are they take really basic concepts and they make a whole chapter out of it that kind of just waste your time.
Yeah.
For me, what I found is when it is a fable or a story that's trying to drive home a point, like a Raving Fan type of thing, then your mind tends to be able to float and drift and move a little bit more, because you're not so focused on missing something that's next, because you kind of know where the story's going, right? Kind of like with a lot of movies that you watch. So your mind kind of drifts. And when your mind is drifting, it's drifting about your own business. So you're thinking, oh yeah, okay, I can do this, and then that works. And
we apply the story to our own.
Yeah, Seth Godin had one called Free Prize Inside, which is one that made an impact, on the business. And I'm always looking through that. There's one it's called Influence, which is more along the lines of marketing. And so it's, I got, like I said, hundreds of them. So there's a pricing one, and there's I know where to go, because I have so many of them. I know where to go if I get stuck on something. It's like, okay, this is where I go for this. I also know what ones I purposely avoid, which I shouldn't, which are, like coding and stuff like that, which I have to learn better so I don't get fucked in the end, because you start getting where you got to hire people, but then you don't even know the questions to ask them because you don't know enough about it to know from there. Anything marketing wise, I think, is usually better served if it's coming from a textbook, because the principles of marketing are never going to change, but the means do. So people will find a book on marketing that's going to say Facebook posts are the number one way to market. And what they realize is this book is 5 years old. The algorithms changed so bad that the only thing on Facebook worth a shit anymore are the ads that you pay for. So now, Instagram, it has a lot of power, it has a lot of influence, but it's owned by Facebook. So everybody knows where it's going to go. So anybody who is involved with marketing should be looking for what's going to be next and what's going to be the demographic of that. YouTube has a very young demographic. So you got to ask yourself, how are you going to use that? Are you going to use that as a primary marketing tool when you know that the demographic is 10 years younger than what your buyer is, and hope that you hit them so they remember you 10 years from now? And as a primary tool, I would say that would probably be a bad idea. As a secondary tool, it probably makes sense. But there's marketing dollars and there's marketing time. So you got to look at each one of those and how they're going to work and how they're going to operate. But just in business in general, still all falls back to communication and knowing what your communication strengths are and what they're not. So I'm very good one-to-one, 2-on-1 in very, very small groups. I'm very good if I'm speaking to a crowd. You take me to a restaurant with 10, 15 people, I'm going to be sitting in the corner and not want to talk to anybody. I'm terrible in situations like that. So if it was like a networking event, something like that, it's worthless for me to go. And I'm probably not going to change. So I focus on where my strengths are and then hire people that are better in that market than what I am.
Well, and early on you said when you find out what your weaknesses are, you've actually at the same time figured out what your strengths are.
Yes.
They're the opposite of that.
Yeah, and the thing with business and strength training is in strength training, you always want to bring up your weak points. All right, so you want to kind of maintain your strengths, maybe bring up a little bit, but to get better, you have to bring up your weak points. In business, you have to maximize your strong points. And I would assume in music, it's the same thing. In music, you have to maximize your strong points because those are the things nobody else can duplicate.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, you still have to work on your weak points, but not as much as you have to maximize your strong points. And I think if you look across business, and from what I know about music, you look across music, how many musicians have had to change what they were doing, because somebody said it was the best thing to do that could have probably been great, that ended up sucking because somebody told them to not be them.
Or likewise, there's a singer that I follow, Kristen Chenoweth, who's a Broadway singer, and she's got this voice that's so annoying. Like, to a lot of people, it'd be really annoying. And I bet you at some point somebody said, let's work to take that out. But then she ended up getting some of these roles that made her an icon and she's just, she will always and forever be one of the best Broadway performers of all time. But yeah, what if she had listened to somebody that said, this thing, she considered it a strength. It was a strength for her that ended up galvanizing her as the thing that,
Yeah. So it's a weird, it's weird how sport doesn't always echo business. And what I've always tried to do with the lifters I know, and even through the company, because most of the target market, as I said, are people who put training as a top priority, is I want to take them and then be able to show them that the skills that they're learning in the gym, from goal setting, overcoming adversity, overcoming sticking points, how to work through things, how to go around, over, under, pivot, strain, all these things that they have can be applied in their jobs or in business, if that's what they want to do, for them to be successful. Because, being at the upper 10, 20% of the sport for most of my life, I see a lot of people that do amazing things on the platform. And then I look at what they're doing with the rest of their life, and it's like, dude, how do you not see how you can use these same tools and be really good, but there's a disconnect. So, if my story helps with that disconnect, then, I do that. If one of the team member stories helps with that disconnect, then that's what we want to try. It's kind of a sub underlying goal of that, because a lot of times when you're dealing with the strength sports, you're dealing with the people that feel like they're outcasts. They feel like they're misfits. They feel like they don't fit in. That's why they end up in a sport based around building strength or how they look to be able to look stronger. That really doesn't have to involve any other people whatsoever except them.
Right.
All right. So isolated ego building, but it's not really even ego building. It's because they don't have a sense, of purpose or whatever it is for that. So that they gravitate towards that. It changes as sports grow. As they become bigger, you start to get people that come in that don't have that same thing, but they are usually not the people that are going to make it to the top either, because typically those would be more team sport people that like to be around and work with other people.
Do you find that people that rise to the top, and I actually kind of see a similarity, some of the most iconic musicians are quite individual, and they rely on their individuality, and it's what drives them. They're driven to be completely individual. Is that kind of the same with some of these top level? I mean, I've watched Pumping Iron, Generation 2, is that the newer one? And some of these guys are, wow, they're interesting.
Yeah. Most definitely. It's that, they don't, I hate to make overwhelming assumptions, because there's outliers, but I would say in most cases that's the case. And in a lot of the cases, if I was to guess, maybe half, they start to have a little bit of success, and then they don't know how to control the ego because they've never had anything to have an ego before. So then ego becomes their problem. It becomes their enemy. And that begins to become self-destructive even to their own training, because it's the first time that they've really done something that they've felt that they've really accomplished, that they're really good at, that they're better than other people in. And it takes them time to be able to realize it's not so much being better than other people, it's being better than yourself, and then competing to be able to compare. But it's still being done for yourself. Now when you're more of a team player, some of that can bleed out to where you got somebody on the team that's very egotistical and self-centered, and usually the coach will either be able to get them to find a way to fix their shit, or the other players will, or the captains will, or they just end up not going to the next level. Because in most team sports, it takes the whole team to be able to win. One person just can't pull it off. So that it's weird, because from a leadership standpoint, I've always had a dislike for crossover in leadership material, like leadership books and people who are teaching leadership, because you'll have sport coaches teaching leadership to business executives. Or military teaching leadership skills to businesses or sport coaches. And the example I like to use that makes the most sense is, let's say I'll take a Division I football team, running back, and I'm going to compare that to our customer service rep. Now that Division I running back's probably got 3 people deep. All right. So if the starter isn't pulling his weight, the second guy is waiting in the wings. You know, supporting the first guy because he has to.
Yeah.
And if the leadership is really, really good, the coach knows how to get them to work together. He still wants that job.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Then the third guy still wants that job too. So you got 3 people that want that job. So the head guy, you know, the starter goes down, right?
Yeah.
Twists an ankle or something like that. He's out of the game. Second guy is going to do everything in his power to show he's better than the other guy.
Yeah. Right.
So he's going to step up and not step up. He's going to step up and play the best he's ever played in his life because he's been waiting a year and a half for his shot. Okay. Now, if he goes down, the third guy is going to be exactly the same way. Right. Now, the thing with that leadership is the coach has to be able to get all 3 of those guys to work together, to get along and not be competitive and support each other. So if the first guy goes down, he's like, come on, man. And he can help the other guy, you know, get the job done, you know, when he does that. So that's that leadership. Okay. Where I can sit there and say from a business perspective, fuck, I'd love that. Right. Let's say, you know, I got, you know, customer service out there and I got somebody sitting right behind her that wants her job just as bad as that running back wants that first place position. So when she sits up and when she gets up to take a break or she gets up to go out to lunch, this guy gets in the chair. He's going to blow her away.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to do everything he can to try to show that he's better than she is and take her job. And then if for some reason he has to go to the bathroom, the third person is going to step in. All right. So I sit there as a business leader and say, how fucking hard is that to lead?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it kind of leads itself, right?
Right.
Where if you talk to the sport coach, it's like, no, man, it ain't like that.
Yeah.
Because these 3 guys they're actually gonna, they can hate each other if you don't know what you're doing. So don't tell me the leadership principles are the same.
Yeah.
I got 1, right? You got 3 and maybe a couple others. I got 1. All right. So if I got 1 that's having a bad day, I can't pull them out of the lineup or out of the startup and put another one in.
Right.
I got to figure out how to get them to have, you know, to be in a better mood or a better day. Or if I have one that's not performing, you know, the way that they're supposed to perform, you know, I can't just replace them. I have, and put in somebody else. I have to be able to get them out of the organization before it becomes a virus and starts impacting other people around them. So it's a different situation. Then the military is a hierarchy.
Yeah.
You know, so that's whole. So you got to look. I mean, you can always learn when you're reading from different leadership strategies, but you got to always think and say, well, is this going to work?
Right.
You
right.
know,
Is it actually going to work for my industry at this time?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to wrap up, and one of the things we talk about on this podcast is remarkable living and fruitful living, not necessarily success, but fruitful, remarkable lives, and that's something that certainly you've had. What is the number one thing you would say to someone who is looking at the life ahead of them and thinking, I want to be able to look back and see a very fruitful and remarkable life?
Find a good partner to walk the road with. You know, that would be the best advice I can say. You know, because I don't know how else to answer. I mean, it's just is what it is. You know, because there's in sickness and health, and you know, all these things change. You know, money changes. You know, it can come in, it can go away. You know, health changes. It can get bad, it can go away. Looks change. It can be great. You can get, you know, ugly. You know, physiques change. It can be good. It can get ugly. You know, if you got the right person that you're walking down the path with, all those things, they don't matter. You know, you have somebody that cares, you know, and will care unconditionally. And outside of, for the majority of people, the only people that care unconditionally are their parents. So if you can find that one person, you know, that can care unconditionally to be able to walk that road with you, you know, you really don't need anything else.
That's great. I love that. Josh, do we have any questions?
We don't.
I've been wanting to say that. I love every time. No, we're not live. Well, this is great.